this video today, we're going to go over a lot of different things when it comes to the Whoop app. If you're using it, the nuances you should know. If you're not using it, the benefits of using it. And this is all based off of 3.5 years of using it myself, as well as working with tons of people who've used Whoop and just understanding the nuance, the algorithm, the pros and the cons, where to take a grain of salt and what to do with it. So by the end of this video, you'll know, do I want to use Whoop? And if I'm using it, am I interpreting all of this data correctly? What's really interesting about this, it's not very obvious. And so I really want to talk about it. This is a day is because I had a massive refeed meal at the end of a 3-day fast. And I love the day after a refeed because that's when I perform well. So I felt so good this whole day. I crushed it at volleyball. I didn't like break my PRs in weightlifting, but I had a really exemplary day in the gym, even though I only slept 6.5 hours. But why does that seem so bad? Or why would I do that? Look at the restorative sleep. Over 2/3 of the time of sleep was REM and deep sleep. That means I am wildly recovered and ready to go, especially with that little time, especially nuance and intuition, knowing yourself, because I woke up feeling great. I could have looked at this number and said, oh, I don't want to do all of this stuff because I am almost a red recovery. I am moderately recovered, and this is just too much. I don't do 20.5 strain most days. Most days I'm probably, between 13 and 16, but I felt so good. And I knew that this number really impacts this number. Your HRV is one of the major contributors to computing recovery in the Whoop algorithm. And I know that it was only low because I had a late night meal the night before, and it was a large meal because I was breaking a fast. Could I have not done that and had a green recovery and still done all of this and maybe got a little more sleep? Absolutely. But real life happens. So I was like, you know what? I'm hungry. I was originally going to be a 5-day fast. I'm like, screw that. 3-day fast. I'm going to eat. And I know I have opportunity to do all these activities that I love. It's Saturday. I've had a long week. Fuck it. So I ate a ton, got a lot of restorative sleep. I woke up and I crushed this. That's the first part. So if we go back to the day before, look at Friday. Whoa. 210 HRV. Keep in mind, the average person's HRV is between like 50 and 100 on most days. 98% recovery, which is very good for me. I'm rarely ever that high. Much less restorative sleep. So there's some nuance here too. The nuance is the reason this is so high is because I was fasting. So digesting takes away from HRV, because what HRV really shows up, if we had to simplify it into a single sentence, is how recovered is your central nervous system? Well, that's a complicated question because there's multiple things that could take away from your central nervous system's recovery or limited resources. And there's multiple things that, if you took them away, would elevate it. So I know I haven't fasted a lot. I haven't eaten a lot. I've been fasting. So my digestive system is not taking away from my HRV, or being overtraining or emotionally stressed out, things like that. So this day, I got a ton of work done because I didn't have to worry about food or working out, right? I just did a little bit of mobility for 5 minutes in the morning, and I went on a really long walk with the dogs midday. Outside of that, I felt super fulfilled because I have a fulfilling job as a coach. I was not overwhelmed because I had allocated all the time I would normally spend in the gym and on my meals to work. So I felt super caught up. I slept great. I went to bed earlier than I had a couple of nights before. I didn't have my digestive system taking away from my resources that are valuable for showing Whoop specifically through HRV and a few other things. Because I had this kind of a day, I knew the next day after a late meal, I would be so ready to rock. Let's keep going. So even the day before, same thing. HRV is super high, same reason. But if you notice, there's a difference in restorative sleep. You don't always need to get a ton of restorative sleep. The more, the better. Most people probably should be shooting for 2.5 to 3. I do not get 4.5 hours every night, even though out of the 2 out of the 3 days I've shown you, I have. Again, I think there's a lot of nuance there. My one qualm with Whoop is that it doesn't always track restorative sleep accurately, and I'll talk about that a little later. So I guess it's a little later already. What's really great about Whoop, if you're not using it, is it divides your sleep into these categories automatically. And if you were to click on one or the other, it would show you where during the night. And you can kind of see, and you can be like, oh yeah, my dog barks in the middle of the night, and I remember waking up and it took me a while to go back to sleep, right? You can see these correlations. Not necessarily, but you can see them. These little areas show you where your average is, like what percentage of sleep or what duration of your whole night of sleep. So normally I get a lot of light and probably enough deep in REM, but not this much, which is really great to see. Not that you don't need light sleep, it serves a purpose, but really you want to optimize these first and reduce wake time overall. So it's neat that it shows you that. But there are times when I know that I've had a lot of dreams or I didn't really wake up much, and it will still say that I have like a ton of light sleep, a ton of wake time, and like zero deep and REM sleep. I have not figured out for the life of me why it does that, but there have been several nights for me and my clients and my friends and my girlfriend where, and we look at this stuff all the time, where it's like, this doesn't make any sense. So Whoop, great device, not perfect, grain of salt with the metrics. But I do love the amount of data it gives you, as long as you can take it with a grain of salt. And the more that you can pin down, is this an anomaly? Is this an error? Is this a glitch? Or is this a trend? And I think that's really important whenever you're looking at data, is to establish what is a trend and what is something you should just write off. So what I really like about Whoop is when you go down to the plan at the bottom, you can look at these three things. The insights, fill out a journal, which I'll show you where that is. If you haven't used Whoop, I would suggest just taking a big skim through the whole journal and figuring out what things interest you to see if it impacts your sleep or not. If you've been using Whoop for a while, I would revisit it, because since I started 3.5 years ago, it's probably quadrupled the amount of options that you can put in your journal, which is what you fill out every day in order for it to give you insight to what habits are contributing to your recovery and your sleep and which ones aren't, right? So this is the impact. It's kind of self-explanatory, but like getting a lot of sleep really helps. Go figure. You know, caffeine, which is interesting, but I only ever drink caffeine 90 minutes after waking, and I hardly ever drink it 10 hours before bed. So these are basically all of the things that help increase things. If it's 2% or less, Whoop says plus or minus. It basically tells you like, hey, it's not a significant amount of recovery or taking away from recovery enough to be notable. But then the things that really take me away from getting good recovery are stress, time with friends and family, which here's another thing. It's not that spending time with my friends and family takes me away from this, but when I log this and I spend a lot of time with friends and family, I'm probably like traveling back home, going through time zones, on a vacation, up late for a special event, whether that's like a birthday or whatever. So it's like, again, take it with a grain of salt. Make sure you apply your mental model of common sense to this. Emotional mental state. I check that off when I get overwhelmed. It makes a ton of time or a ton of sense. Outdoor time doesn't really make much sense to me, because I typically sleep better outdoors, but maybe it's the time that I'm outdoors the most that I'm playing soccer or volleyball. So I have a lower recovery, not because I was outdoors, but because I'm really pushing it and I might be overtraining or overexpending. And so then my recovery goes down, but that's okay. It's what you're supposed to do. Everything in nature related to a wave, right? A literal wave has a crest and a fall. Frequencies, same thing. Your insulin spiking and your blood glucose spiking aren't bad things. It's supposed to spike and then come down, right? So we're supposed to have this motion. When it comes to training and recovery, it's the same way. You want to push yourself because that's what helps you get more physically fit. That's what really gets your ticker in tip-top shape. But you need to rest after. And then when you're recovered, you push yourself again. So it's this kind of motion. Anyhow, so that's why, like, if you look at this without the context, you say, oh, outdoors, bad. Or friends and family, bad. Clearly it's not. Or sleeping in my own bed isn't bad. It's just when I sleep next to my lady, I sleep a lot better. And she's not always in my bed. It's not too much. Alcohol, honestly, the easiest thing anybody can do from all of my experience to increase the recovery is don't eat within 2 to 3 hours of bed. Have a fulfilling day. Don't drink alcohol at all. Or if you do, not close to bed. And manage your stress, because that's what both of these are for me. See, 13 plus strain. Is it bad to get over 13 strain? No. But could it be good to recover if you have over 13 strain? Probably. All right. Next. All right. So back at the home menu, this is the log. So all of the things we just looked at come from building out this journal. So these are the ones that I use, right? I just believe that sunlight and circadian rhythm are one of the biggest things that impact our recovery and our hormones and our health. So I'm looking at all of that. I'm interested in this one. So I put it on there just to see. Stress, again, is a big one for me. But basically everything that you've seen on that other page is either a yes or no question, or it has something to do with the time. And perhaps you're like, oh, this seems like cumbersome, blah, 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 blah. I don't know if I remember all that. That's okay. Just ballpark it. It doesn't have to be exact. None of this is going to change your life. If you're using the app and you want to get down to what I do and what my clients do, where we're only using it like 5 minutes a day, you'll ballpark it and it'll give you great insights. If this is too much, you don't have to use the journal, right? I suggest that people do it if you're using Whoop, but it's really kind of a bonus. So if it doesn't jive with you and it feels like too much, don't do it. But like everything, I would suggest trying it for 30 days and seeing if you like it or not. So you've seen all of this. And again, we go back up to the top and we can customize it. And look at this. There's so many things that you could do. So scroll through, see what's pertinent to you, see what you're interested in, and select those items for your journal. There's not right or wrong things, but there is nuance with them, just like we talked about. All right. So when we go over to overview, and that's this tab, and I'm actually going to pull it up on a different tab. You have your assessments at the bottom. Now, these I think are super helpful, and you don't necessarily have to log in the journal for these to be helpful. You just have to make sure that you're getting sleep and activities logged. So what that looks like, let's look at the weekly first. So this is my last week, which I'm not showing you guys like best week I've ever done. This is like a week where I actually had some stress and I was up late 2 nights, much later than I normally am. So the week, it gives you this little curve. Like it wants you to have a strain based off of how recovered you are. And sometimes when I'm in the middle of the strain, I fucking send it and I don't care, just like for the reasons we talked about earlier. So this is interesting, but I wouldn't really change anything you do based off this. But if you're getting like all of this high strain when you're down here, that's probably a problem, but you don't necessarily have to sync high strain with high recovery. The sleep consistency is cool. I use it as a visual, like how close am I to hitting this box? This is the optimal sleep. I'll tell you right now, if you're a really active person, Whoop's algorithm really is favorable to higher sleep the more that you train yourself. I don't know if I believe in that. I think the more restorative you sleep, or the more restorative sleep you get when you have higher activity days is great, but it's pretty harsh. Like I'm almost always in sleep debt, which is where I haven't gotten enough sleep cumulatively based off of how much strain that I've spent. And it's because it wants me in here. In reality, with what I do and most of my clients do, I think if you go 2 or 3 boxes out and you're in that range, you're going to be fine. I've seen people with really good blood work, really fit, really happy with think more of that. Now, is this optimal? Probably. Is it realistic? Not for people who are pushing the limits or really just challenging themselves. So what I really like is it compares your strain and your sleep to your previous 3-week average. So basically you're looking at 4 weeks, right? The whole month. And this is really neat because let's say you are really wanting to push it more and you can't feel it, you can't see it yet, but you look at Whoop and you're like, oh man, compare, because really, why would you compare yourself to anyone but yourself? You're comparing yourself to a previous iteration of yourself and you're like, I fucked that guy up. Chris 2 weeks ago is a total bitch. So this week, for example, I played pickleball, volleyball. I normally play soccer, did all these things, and I had 3.4 strain higher, which is really good because, again, most people average maybe between 10 and 16 in a given day. And so to be right in the middle of that range for someone who's active is fairly normal. In fact, with my clients, I'm like, let's push for 13.0 strain or more on average. But there's going to be differences from week to week. So this gives you a good visual on able to compare that. So I'm happy with that strain. It tells you how many hours a week you spent doing activity. So I went on some hikes. I played a lot of sports. That's why that's much higher. Same thing for that. Then it'll even, show you what you did and what the strain was, which is cool to look at that from week to week. Again, 3-week average previous and your sleep percentage. Mine was down because I had a few stressful / late nights, which is on me, nobody else. But again, the comparison is nice. So the gray number is the 3 weeks. This is the last week. So this comes out on Monday. Forgot to say that. It'll even show you how many hours of sleep you got this past week versus the average. And this is what I was talking about, the sleep need. I'm always in debt, almost always in debt by like 1 to 2 hours. You can see here, this is like, I guess 1 hour and 20 minutes. And this one's like 2 hours and 6 minutes. But that is one of the things that you take, especially as an active person, a massive grain of salt with about the app and the algorithm. I'm in bed versus sleep need, wake time and sleep debt. Interesting. I'm really more concerned with this. So bed and wake times is like this. Outside of the things I mentioned before, this is one of the easiest ways to dial in your recovery, your hormones, your circadian rhythm, your mental focus, your gym performance, body composition, everything. Just like have semi-consistent bed and wake times. And I love this visual, even though it looks like something a psychiatrist would show you and be like, what does this image look like? Just to figure out how they can poke your childhood memories with a massive Q-tip through your nose. That was a bit of a rant. So normally I would have, so again, late stressful nights, 2 nights, not normal for me. But if it was a semi-normal night, we wouldn't see this much variance. What's really cool, as you can see, this is the variance in bedtime and wake time. If we can get this number under an hour, that's huge for most people's health. It's like one of the biggest things you can do for sleep, just quality of life in general. So normally I am under an hour there, around half an hour there. This is basically saying, so because of those 2 nights, this went up a lot, but I was still waking up at the same time. So this actually went down. This is crazy. I don't know if I've ever had it this low. I have clients that get this low once in a blue moon, but that's wild. You don't need to hold yourself to perfection. You just want to get within like a 60-minute or less window. Is just an easy way to think about it. On average, above a little bit, no big deal. If you're below a little bit, great, bonus. That's the weekly. The monthly assessment, it is much more comprehensive. I don't think I want to go into this too in depth, but it has sleep debt here to compare for the whole month before. So I actually got 22 minutes more sleep on average in the last month. This is March to February, right? It's April 30th now. So see what my Whoop stats for next month look like tomorrow, because it comes out on the 1st of the following month. Got more restorative sleep. So this is deep sleep. This is REM sleep. It's cool to compare that. Ideally, like I said, I would love, like most people probably do best, having 2 to 3 hours of restorative sleep. Here is the sleep need that I'm always lacking on. My actual sleep, I got above it 1 day. Yay. There's just like another visual for this. And honestly, Whoop is really great at having visuals for things. I love looking at this at the end of every month. And it seems like a lot at first. And if you don't have Whoop, it's like, this is way too much. But if you have Whoop, and you can ask someone who's had Whoop, you can look through this, you can get some nuggets of knowledge, and then you can move on. So it's not a big deal, right? Just compare like number of activities for this to the month before, total activity duration for the month versus the month before, and just like compare and be like, am I moving the direction I want, or do I need to give myself some grace because this was a crazy month, but I'm going to get back on the train? It's just really nice to have a visual and to be motivated, especially if you're trying to make a change, or if you fell off the wagon a little bit. The same thing with strain and recovery and sleep. The strain, the darker the box, the more strain it was. It's just a nice visual to see which months you were pushing it. And you can even compare the total strain down here. And then same thing with the recovery. I am in the red a lot more than a lot of my clients, and that's why I average in the yellow. You probably can barely see that. It's like 57. This is 58. But that's because I'm pushing myself. So a lot of people say, oh, I don't have enough green, I'm failing. No, you should be getting in the yellow. Maybe not have as much red as me. It's probably my own fault. But there's, again, the wave thing. You're going to be low some days. That's fine. Rest and then come back up. It's all right to go through that like kind of piston movement between the same. And with sleep, I like to say somewhat arbitrary, but based on my experience, if you're getting 70% above on sleep, you're making it. That's enough. If you're getting 80% or more, that's great. If you're getting 90% or more, you are an overachiever and good for you. Last bit on the monthly assessment. Actually, sorry. Second to last. Wait, scroll up. They might see it. Overreaching is basically what I was talking about. It's saying that you are pushing the limits of your recovery and strain so that you are making fitness gains. I think it even says what I said better right there, so you can ignore me. So with people, you see the wave here? I know it's not pretty, but that's kind of what it's like. This is what I'm talking about. Over the course of months or weeks or whatever, you want to have some times that are restorative. And I may not get enough of that. You want some optimal, it's okay to bounce around. But I do, personally, I think Whoop is maybe a little harsh with saying reaching and restorative. It's okay to go back and forth with all these things. Now, physiological response is really interesting. Let's say you are really dialing in your health. You should see this move in a favorable direction. Higher HRV generally means more recovered and or more physically fit. Lower resting heart rate generally means more recovered, more physically fit. There's a ton of other variables and nuance there, but what I'll say is if you're relatively the same and you go, with a resting heart rate plus or minus 1 or 2, that's a normal variation. With HRV, I would say plus or minus like 10, maybe not 10%. That's a pretty big change, honestly, there and there. Probably plus or minus like, because HRV is much, much more different. Resting heart rate is smaller, numerical of variance for individuals. I would say with HRVs, probably like 2 to 5% changes is semi-normal. So like I know with these months, I was traveling, holidays, all these things, less vitamin D. So that like none of this really bothers me. But like this is a really good change. So what happened was spring hit, I started to get more active. I stopped being a hermit, came out of monk mode, and we started getting after it. And you can see that, oh yeah, I'm more physically fit and I'm recovered. Now, if I just got more physically fit, but I wasn't prioritizing sleep and recovery, these would have gotten worse because strain goes higher and it brings these things down. All right. Shameless plug. You know how I said you could find me? I don't know where to put myself. I'm going to do a lot more things on Whoop and just understanding recovery metrics and this stuff in the future. If you are considering getting on Whoop or you're already on Whoop and you want to be with a group of people, I have this friends and friends of friends Whoop group where we challenge each other, friendly competition. No one judges anyone else, but it is really cool to see what other people are doing, what their stats are, and everything like that. If you are wanting to try it for a month free, again, I'm not sponsored by Whoop. I just love the product. My clients use it. I will put this link in my description. Just copied it, bitches. That way you can try it a month on me. Yes, I get a free month, but considering I just told you all the cool shit about it and the not so cool shit, I think I deserve it. So I think that about covers it. If you have any questions, let me know. I love talking about the nuance of this stuff. I'm going to put out some shorter versions, pieces of this on Instagram. And I wouldn't recommend Whoop more. Just know that there's a steep learning curve. There are some nuances. And really how deep you want to go depends on what you're looking for, right? I love to match this up with blood work and DEXA scan, especially if you're trying to improve your hormones and trying to improve your body composition. This will cover your sleep, your fitness side of things, but then it's really nice to corroborate that with some data. Again, blood work and DEXA are my favorite to compare to this. Also tracking, I love chronometer. That's a big thing that I would suggest people use for macros, micros, calories. Between those four, it seems a lot. If you don't need all of them, don't use all of them. But if you cross-reference those four, you can learn a lot. That's what I help people do. And see you guys next time for another controversial video.